You always get the pretty picture and like the wedding things where they're helping you get ready or dressed. So I know she won't ever be there for that. Or like and then like my kids one day, they won't ever have like a grandmother.
At just 3 years old, someone killed Hannah Neville's mother, Robin Reeves. Now in her 20s, she has no memory of the woman who brought her into this world and says she feels robbed of a future.
Someone just took it away and either doesn't think another thing about it or just gets to live free and not even being held responsible for what they did.
Neville's younger brother, Joseph Standridge, was just 1 year old when his mother was killed.
I remember looking at my peers and sometimes breaking down because they always had something I didn't, and that was the family.
The two small children were left in their grandmother's care.
And give her a kiss and tell her I'm praying for justice.
Now that both children are adults, Faye Reeves still holds on to hope after her only daughter was taken from her in a brutal act of murder.
Real sweet surprise, and born on Valentine's Day. And the first time I saw her, I told her I'll always have a Valentine.
Reeves grew up in Thompson with her parents. Her mother describes her as sweet, artistic, often leaving memorable drawings behind, and athletic. She says she had a lot of friends, too. One of them was Susan Schuneman. She tells us they met in kindergarten.
On the day that we met, there was a particular boy, and I'm not going to name who it was, that had tried to kiss me and was chasing me on the playground. And in Robin fashion, she kind of came to my rescue, and that was our friendship. She was there.
Robin was never on time. You always had to tell Robin an hour earlier if you wanted Robin to be on time, but Robin was just a bubbly, outgoing person.
And that personality helped her become fast friends with a special person during her job at Augusta Technical College. Sabrina White says her buddy was also a prankster.
One gentleman who was responsible for like vacuuming the hallways and the offices and that sort of thing, and she would always go and unplug his vacuum cleaner. So of course he would be like, what in the world just happened? Go down the hallway and plug his vacuum cleaner back up and go back off, and she'd do it again, and of course he'd holler, Robin!
Amid the laughter, Reeves's personal life was bittersweet.
She had been divorced, I think, twice prior to marrying Robert.
Attorney and neighbor Jimmy Plunkett says that marriage with Mr. Standridge was no walk in the park.
And that was a tumultuous marriage. That's really an understatement. She went through a lot of mental aggravation. After their divorce, he would drive by the house. She had to get a restraining order on him. The police would be called at all hours of the day and night when he would be driving by and just stepping out in the yard to harass her.
My husband and I at the time, we drove her to Thompson, and when we got to the house, we put Joseph down, and Robin laid down on the couch to go to sleep. And when we left, he was outside. He had driven by outside, and so he was very much aware of her comings and goings.
Those close to Robin Reeves saw what they say was harassment from her ex-husband. It was a divorce some say was sparked by substance abuse and detailed in Robin's own words.
She kept like a calendar, and originally I think it was just to keep like her headache log, but it turned into like Robert home late, or Robert was so mean. Or even apparently I was like in a crack house and they like had to go find Hannah and like found Hannah at 3 a.m. So it's just like I didn't know what all she was having to go through.
Some of Reeves' friends and family knew she lived in fear. Schuneman says her friend kept a recorder on her body and one on her phone. She even changed her last will and testament and her last name in the days before her murder.
She said to me when I said, "Aren't you afraid?" And there was this long pause, and it's like she breathed a deep breath, and she said, "Susan, I'm afraid every day of my life."
On the night of February 27, 2001, that fear caught up with Robin Reeves, but not before she had one last celebration.
That was the Shrove Tuesday, so traditionally that's pancake supper night. And so we had gotten together and had pancakes, and there was bacon and sausage, and everybody was in a good mood. And
Kelly Evans, a fellow member of Holy Cross Episcopal Church, says she looked up to Robin, who was just a few years older. Their final hours together centered around family and friends and watching Joseph run around despite having braces on his legs.
She was happy. She was happy. She was happy with her children. She was happy being a mother. She was happy being there at the church with her family.
Faye Reeves tells us her daughter and grandson arrived at the church around 6 o'clock that evening. Her granddaughter Hannah was in Augusta with her father. She too says Robin had a grand time talking with everyone in their small church during that pancake supper. Then, a little more than an hour later, she left.
She and Joseph left about, I'd say, 7:15. And I was going to stay and help clean up the kitchen and all. And she got ready to go and came in the kitchen and gave me a kiss. And she said, "Now I want you to call me when you get home so I'll know you got in safely."
But Faye Reeves never received that call, and she made several calls that night to her daughter's home, right next door to hers on Gordon Street. She even went to the home after Hannah's father shared that he received no answer when they called to wish her a good night. But all seemed well when she saw that Joseph's room door was slightly open, as it always is when they turn in for the night. The next morning, she called Augusta Tech to talk with her daughter at work, but instead got a message from a co-worker.
She said, "Miss Faye, Robin hasn't come in yet, and in fact, we're really concerned about it."
That's when she grabbed the key to her daughter's home and made her way inside.
I saw her laying in the hall, and I walked over, and I saw blood, and I knelt down and I just patted her arm.
In a state of shock, Reeves could not dial 911, so she went outside and found a passerby to do it. Thompson police was there within minutes, and the GBI came later.
The cause was stab wounds, manner of nagging homicide.
I found out later that her face had been cut from here back, and it was like, pieced together, and he told me later if I had touched it, he was afraid it might have, opened up. Her arms were wrapped in plastic. And I said, "Why in the world are her arms wrapped like that?" And he said, "Because evidently she was trying to protect her face and all, and that her arms were just slivered."
Reeves says she reported to the 911 dispatcher that the door to Robin's bedroom was standing open the morning she found her daughter. She believes the killer or killers were already inside her home when she returned from church that night.
I feel like they came out of her bedroom. That light was not on. I feel like they came out of there. And there was a lot of scuffling that had gone on in Hannah's room. And there was a flower arrangement on a brass stand in that hallway. And I feel like she heard something and picked that up, because in the bedroom, Hannah's bedroom, there was that brass stand and the flowers were scattered around. And I feel like they just got her from behind.
I was in the same house when she died, from my understanding, and they could have just easily killed me.
While there have been no arrests in the case, Pat Morgan says the GBI does have some people they are interested in, but the office is still working on getting enough evidence.
I strongly feel that we here at the GBI know who was involved in the case. Problem is you have to prove it.
Morgan says it's common to look into any partners, and in this case, Reeves' now deceased ex-husband Robert Standridge was investigated.
Her ex-husband had moved to California, and at one point we had some tips that came in from California. So I dealt with some agencies out in California, and we followed up and, to see what we could figure out.
Even Reeves' lawyer, Plunkett, worked to ensure that her children went to her mother. And during that custody hearing, he questioned Robert Standridge about his role in his ex-wife's murder.
The sum was $12,500 that I had traced that he could not account for. And when I asked the question, on the stand, did you use that money to have Robin killed? He said, I plead the Fifth Amendment.
I talked to my dad maybe 2 years ago, and he was so adamant that he had no involvement in, you know, all this and this, but it just felt like, it just felt rehearsed.
21 years later, investigators still use technology and evidence found in the home to help solve the case.
I know we have fingerprint evidence that is in what we call AFIS, the Automated Fingerprint Identification System. I'm not, you know, we've not been real lucky on DNA.
For loved ones, they remain hopeful in one day seeing justice. That's someone admitting what they did and being found guilty of the murder.
We have continued to make sure that it doesn't go away. We have a visual for Robin every year on February 27th.
I don't know how you could go around, and especially as a small town, and it's not like you didn't know that I was around. I worked at the grocery store, so it's like I always thought, it's like, oh God, it's someone that I'm checking out being nice to.
I don't need justice. I need closure.
And I have no idea if they're even alive, but I would like to see them go to prison.
Anyone with any information about the Robin Reeves case should contact the GBI at 706-595-2575. Next time on the Cold Case Project, we take you to North Augusta, where 28-year-old Travis Smith was shot to death at an apartment complex on September 29, 2012. What family and law enforcement need to get justice and close the case.